And we're live. It's Sunday night. It's February 8th. Just 10 seconds ago, I looked at the date. And then
And it was February 7th?
it was like, and all of a sudden, it's February 8th. It's Sunday night. This is episode 6.0. We've finished um, 42 episodes. This is the 43rd episode in a row. We bring you nightly episodes with our unique numbering scheme just to confuse everybody because, if you're not confused, I don't think you're thinking enough. Gotta challenge the lazy brain. It's the lazy brain. Memory. That's actually tonight's episode, too. Right? I forgot the date 10 seconds after I looked at it. Tonight I was calling it subtotal recall. And maybe I win a prize for memory failure already on that. But yeah, subtotal recall. Uh, and that was the only topic I have up for tonight. Just because I could probably talk, it could make me think of a lot of other things with memory. But what triggered it was let's do before we get to the standard sort of updates. Our like page, look at this, 29 likes.
Woo!
And we were stuck at 26 for a while, then it went up to 27 last week.
Do I need to leave the show more often? Is that the deal?
And then, Dutch had the night off last night, and apparently it must have been a magical show. That we're up to 29 likes today. I opened up a couple of new accounts and liked it. No, I have no idea where the likes came from, and that's not altogether true. I have a sense of where one like came from at least, and maybe where the other one came from. But I didn't want to get involved into investigating it.
You're paying people now?
I don't want to get obsessed with them. I don't want to get obsessed with researching them. I just want to get obsessed with the number of them.
You're starting to sound like Jerry Jones.
Yeah. But
I cannot comment on that.
But this is Random Thoughts with Random Access. You're here with Random and Dutch in the VIP room of the Weldon House in beautiful upstate New York. Where, I don't know, are we in the middle of a storm, or are we in the middle of a blizzard, or is it just snowing? I think it's just, I don't even know what it's doing, to tell you the truth.
I don't think they know what the hell it's doing.
I know it's cold outside.
It is doing something right now. It's going sideways, and it is cold.
So
it's almost 8 degrees.
Yeah, so but we're inside and it's warm. And ask us again next week what we remember about tonight, and we'll see how accurate we are.
Subtotal memory.
With our subtotal memory, because that's really what I want to talk about. Was and again, you can see on our Facebook page, we post both things on the Facebook page. That's where the articles really are. You can read them, think about them. This was a good one. This is from the New Yorker magazine. I have no idea what happened. Yeah, I know I felt that way sometimes. Even immediately after an experience, I have no idea what just happened. But sometimes, just our memory going back, trying to remember what happened. But there are things in our lives, events, particularly emotional events that strike us, that we do remember, and we remember them very clearly. I have very clear memory of where I was. We'll go way back in time, where I was when the Challenger shuttle exploded. I remember exactly how I found out. I remember exactly who I called first. I remember what I did. I remember how I found out about it. It's all crystal clear in my head, and it's probably all 100% absolutely wrong. This article does a great job. This is I can't remember now if it was the person who wrote this article, this Maria, I think it was her who did this. She was a graduate student in psychology, and she had this professor that she was working with, and he did this experiment, and he's done a lot of these experiments over time. Right after the Challenger exploded, the very next day, and he took his freshman class, or whatever they were, introduction to class, and had them all fill out these carefully detailed surveys of those questions that I just was talking about. Who told you? Where were you when you first found out? Who told you? Who did you tell first? What was the first thing you did? And people, they wrote basically like a diary kind of thing. and they just put it away. And that was 1986, if you remember. For some reason, I want to think it was a Monday, but I hope it was a Monday. I feel like it was a Monday. It might not have been. I see. I didn't want to say Tuesday because 9/11 was a Tuesday, and I don't want it to both be on Tuesdays. But I remember, at least my recollection of it was before noon, maybe 11 o'clock or something, 10:30, 11 o'clock. It was in the morning, late morning, and I was either I wasn't getting ready to go to work at the time. In fact, this is how much my memory is. I was either between jobs or I was working a new job. I remember it was about that time I was changing jobs. Um, is that true? Maybe not. I see. It's really confusing. I feel like had to go to work that day, but I was off for maybe I was working the afternoon shift, but for some reason I wasn't at work and I was lounging around in bed late in the morning. So I wasn't. At least I didn't have to work the lunch shift. I was actually I was cooking French fries at a hamburger place. And if I remember correctly, if that's the right job, I was in charge of cooking the French fries. But I wasn't working the lunch shift that day. So I wasn't at work or getting ready for work. I was just kind of taking it easy and watching the shuttle go off. And Tuesday does feel right. I think I'm just avoiding the Tuesday because 9/11 was a Tuesday. I don't want two Tuesdays. Well, anyway, these people, they filled this survey, students. And then 2.5 years later, I guess they were able to get the students back together or track them down, and they brought them in and interviewed them. And basically, I guess had them fill it out again or had them talk about it. Um, and then they also had them rate their confidence in their recollections. Tell us now. How confident are you that what you're saying is true? How much? And of course, my mind exploded when I read this part. Is they graded the students' memories on a scale of 1 to 7, how accurate the memories were. But when they asked the students themselves to rate how confident you are in your memory, they had them rate the accuracy of their own memories on a scale of 1 to 5. I was like, what? Why wouldn't you use the same scale, 1 to 7 on both scales? We can grade their memories on 1 to 7 because maybe there were 7 questions or whatever. But for others, that had a 1 to 7. Well, then just use that same scale to ask them to rate their memory on a scale. So that way, there's some sort of correlation between because there are scores. The average score for people's memory was like a 3 out of 7, with a full quarter, full 25% of people scoring a 0. But the confidence ratings were well over a 4. Like 4.2 or something like that. So it was people were very, very confident in their memories, but they were not accurate in their memories. Like I said, that was kind of my opening. With so anyway, but challenge was not an exception to this, and this group of students is not an exception. We all suffer from this. And that was this person, Maria. I'll say it was her because I think it was her. Was a graduate student at the time, and working with the professor who ran this. And that experiment here, 2.5 years later in 1989, really got her thinking a lot more about memory. And she was a psychologist, and so she decided to make that her career. She's going to study memory. So she became a memory expert, whatever. And that's what she studies. And she's involved in what they refer to as I love the word longitudinal study. So in science we talk about, and medicine, longitudinal studies. These are studies over a long period of time. So you follow the people like every year or 5 years or 10 years. You check in with them, and because you want to see what the results are over time. And memory is a good thing to test for that. And in particular, in this case, what she was really interested in, as it relates to memory here, is emotional memory. How your emotions play in with your memory, and how does it interact with your memory, and there's basically 3 parts of the brain now that are working in concert here when something really shocking, surprising happens. You have the hippocampus, which is this part of the brain, little thing in there, like they call it the seahorse-shaped gland or whatever it is in the brain. And it kind of plays a big part in just all kinds of memory. It does a lot of memory work. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's in charge of a lot of memory stuff. Then there's the amygdala, which is right near it. There's a little almond-shaped gland in the brain, and the amygdala is where a lot of your emotions are, especially the hyped-up emotions like aggression and anger and fear and fright. Those kind of, the hippocampus is kind of the seat of a lot of the positive emotions like happiness and joy. They kind of sit over there, but the hippocampus and the amygdala is the more the excitable emotions. Um, and it's also not surprising that they're right next to each other, so there's a lot of communication between the two of them. But then there's also your visual cortex, which of course is connected to your eyes. Your eyes are how you're looking, scanning the world. That's the triggering events of the universe. Right? The universe is always talking to me. What does that mean? That means there's things happening out here. There's just events, and I have to witness them, and they have to be filtered through my perspective, and then they travel off, and I start having thoughts about them. I start having emotions related to what I'm seeing, and this is where sort of the amygdala kind of plays a role. The amygdala is part of this thing that I think that helps write some of that stuff in our perspective. Because a lot of our perspective is based on our memories, our experiences. But in a sense, it's really based on our emotional connection to those memories. And that's what the perspective is really doing. It's looking for an emotional trigger because you want to see something that's important that you need to get your eyes focused on. You want to trigger an emotional response quickly. And that's kind of what the amygdala is doing here, and that's the influence it has on the visual cortex too. Is when the amygdala gets alerted by something from the visual cortex, something from the your eyes, boom, triggers this little emotional response in the amygdala. The amygdala starts sending signals over to the visual cortex. It starts saying, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. You'll notice that when you are kind of in an emotional state, a lot of times you get this laser focus. And that's the brain telling the visual cortex, start processing a lot more information. All that stuff's coming flooding in. We try to filter out a lot of nonsense, but there's our time we have to start doing a lot of accurate, a lot more processing. And then the amygdala is also talking down to the hippocampus, saying you better record. You better be recording this. This is and so these three parts of the brain are talking to each other when an emotional thing. And so they do these studies and they want to see what really happens. And they find some interesting things. Here they talk about was one great experiment. I love this experiment. And it's done in 3 stages, and it takes a long time. And you take 2 types of images, animals and tools. So things that they're very different when you look at them. You get an animal or like just some tools. So they're very, very different types of things, and they show the people these images in 3 stages. And so you see some animals and tools just interlaced. You get a few seconds to look at each one, however much they have. The second time they do this to you, what they do is 2 out of the 3 times that you look at a tool image. So basically, there's like a two-thirds probability that you're looking at a tool. A 2/3 probability that when you're looking at a tool, they give you an electric shock. So it's like,
give me an emotional response.
but not every time you look at a tool, but it's enough so that you really get you going. But then you do it again, and then you do a 3rd set where you don't have that. That stimulus, extra stimulus there. So it's not every time they have a tool, but most of the time they see a tool in this middle set that you're giving them an electric shock. So anytime you're trying to teach people, how does the brain react to electric shocks? It kind of reminds us of Milgram, which we've talked about a couple of times, which I like. But it's also, it's the Ghostbusters, right, with Dr. I think it was Beckman, whatever. But it was Bill Murray's character where he's trying to, testing the negative reinforcement on psychic abilities. Can I shock people into getting psychic abilities? And of course, it was in the movie. It's a scam. But anytime you're doing an experiment with electric shocks, you got to be doing something cool. So they do this in that middle set where they just shock them on the tools. And then what they do is they, after they're done, they start asking people questions about the images they looked at. And it turns out that if you were shocking them when they were looking at the tools, they could have done it when they were looking at the animals. That kind of rotates for people. Some people were shocked when they looked at tools. Some were shocked when they looked at the animals. But whatever category you were in, that's what you got shocked on. So I'm just mentioning the tools one. But people who were shocked on the tools, and they remembered a lot about which tools they were looking at. And it turns out they did a pretty good job remembering what tools they were looking at after they got shocked in the third set.
So,
But they also did really good on recalling what tools they looked at the first set before shocks were even introduced there. It was like the brain started working overtime on past memories, going, "Oh my God, I'm getting shocked on these things. When did I see these things in the past? What am I missing here?" Kind of thing. Where the brain did this, and it turns out that this actually works. Sort of like there's like a 6 hour to 6 to 24 hour window after the whole experiment where this thing kind of the memory kind of optimizes here. It's like almost like your brain needs to sleep a little bit. We're not real sure why we sleep as humans. That's a big question. Why do humans sleep? We know a lot of things about sleeping and dreaming, but it's like what is really going on there? And one of the thoughts is that it's a time for your brain to sort of process things without being distracted by a lot of other things. Like shut down all the stimulus and then just let me just work out some things. And it's several hours later after this one, and probably after a night's sleep, especially if it's 24 hours. I'm sure there's a night's sleep involved. Your brain starts doing this little sifting thing going on, and people started remembering. They had pretty good recall of which tools they were looking at before and after and during the time they were being shocked. So there's this thing there's this laser focus that comes into effect when there's an emotional stimulus, which is pretty cool. The other thing they did with this experiment, and they didn't do nearly as well with the animals. I think there was a marked difference between, and their animal memories were pretty much the same, before, during, and after, because the animal memories that weren't getting involved with the shocking part. At least there was, any noise. There was noise in there that maybe after you filter it out. Those were, but the tool one definitely stood up. But the other thing they did during the experiment is, I guess they're watching out, looking at it on a computer. They can control the border around the image, and they change the color of the borders around the image as each image that you looked at. So when you're remembering what kind of image you were looking at, they were asked what color was the border. That like, oh, I was looking at penguins. Okay, and what was the color of the border around the penguins? And then they would, and I was looking at, there was hammers. Okay, what color was the border around here? When they were shocked, they did a much better job of remembering the tools they were looking at, and they were very, very confident about the colors of the borders around the images that when they were being shocked for each of the tools they were looking at. But they were also wrong. And in fact, they did much better on remembering the border colors on the animal pictures than they did on the tool pictures.
Really?
Yeah. So again, what is the memory doing here? Well, one is we're very, very confident about our memories. That's one lesson, especially when we have emotional memories. So we're really sure about all the details of our emotional memories because we're very, very confident about it. It's a hugely important event in our lives. I mean, that's why we have this emotional connection to the memory. What it looks like is happening, though, is the brain is focusing just on the important parts of that emotional memory, and it's ignoring all the other detail that our lazy brain loves to fill in detail. So it just fills in detail, and all that detail gets the same weight of that confidence in my ability to remember it. It carries that same weight as the kernel event that's triggering it. So yes, I remember what color the border was. It was blue. I know for 100% it was blue. No, it wasn't. Trust me, it wasn't blue. And we show you the video. Here you are looking at it. It's not blue. See that? But it's like that. But when you're not having that emotional response to that, your brain is kind of just remembering everything just sort of equally. Yeah, here I'm looking at penguins, and the border is red. The brain is not putting any more emphasis on the penguin than it is on the red, so it does a pretty good job of remembering, or a pretty bad job of remembering both of them, but it does a similar job of remembering both of them. Whereas when it's being shocked with looking at the tools, oh, you remember what tools you're looking at, and that's it. Everything else is just, the brain is like, I'm not paying attention to that other stuff. Unless you're shocking me with colors, I'm remembering tools because that's what's important here, and then it fills in the gaps. And so I don't know. To me, it's just really fascinating about memory, but it's a little scary when you think about it because, you think about emotional times in your life, all those peripheral details that you have thrown in there around the event. There's a pretty good chance they're all wrong. The core event will be true,
Right.
but we put in so many other details because it's just this memory that we want to hold on to, or we, for good or bad, but we hold on to this memory, and so we fill it in with all this crystallized detail that, oh, I saw this and this, and chances are, if this study is to be believed, and this is just one of many studies on memory. Memory is flawed. We've talked about this a lot. But this is this was a nice study that kind of shows how it can work for us and against us, kind of thing. That you can trust the core of the emotional memory, but the details you have to really kind of be suspect of, which witness stuff we've talked about.
Yeah.
And that's actually this woman here, Maria. I think she might have to, because this article talks about some of this witness stuff and working with prosecutions or things like about witness reliability kind of thing, and what we can do differently maybe and how we do it. But when you think about witnesses, if
If somebody you recognize committing a crime, then yes, you recognize that person did the crime.
Because you have an emotional attachment to it.
Right. But
I don't know. I've done a lot of rambling here. Before I go on with this stuff, it's a good time to
maybe chime in with something, what you're thinking.
It's funny how you talk about this because I don't know. We've talked about it before. I suffer from. Well, I'm not suffering. I'm challenged by PTSD and chronic depression, and there are some things that I remember very vividly, but I don't necessarily remember the detail of it. I remember the feeling. I remember the emotional state. And I remember whether or not that it was fearful based or if it was happy. And it's funny because the happy moments I don't remember much at all. Matter of fact, my family always constantly would say, why you always hang on to the negative. And I used to go nuts about that because anybody who knows me personally knows I'm not a negative guy. I really go out of my way in order to be nice to somebody. I go out of my way to impress some people, to be able to make an impact. That's not a negative dude, So I always used to get really upset about that, and to this day, if I was to have this conversation with some of my family members, they'll tell me you always hold on to the negative. Well, it took a while for me to figure it out through PTSD. Is the fact that we have a negative bias in the first place. And so, because it's our survival instinct. As the caveman walked around, he didn't really care about how beautiful the sun was. He cared about the Tyrannosaurus Rex that was over on the other side, or the storms that were coming through that were about ready to take him away, or whatever the case. So it's an instinctual thing as humans to have that negative bias in order to be protective of ourselves. Then add PTSD to it, and you talked about the amygdala. I like to take that thing out for a walk. And I tell you what, that thing, because of my PTSD, and if you look at a brain image from an MRI, of a person who has PTSD versus somebody who doesn't have it. And you have to do, like we talk about science all the time, you have to have a number of different examples of both subjects. You'll find that the person with the PTSD literally has a different formation in their brain when it comes to the amygdala. It literally is enlarged. It's enlarged and it's elongated. And because it's wide open, and what it is that it is searching for the negative to be protected and to know what's going on. Then I also am challenged with borderline personality disorder. Well, for those, just a short description of what that is, it's emphasizing each emotion from one another. So if I'm happy, I'm going to be ultimately happy until I can't be, which we won't get into that. But I mean, but if I'm sad, I'm ultimately sad. So when I'm worried, I'm ultimately worried. So it's just one of those things as to where that's my instinct, to be able to be on the lookout for what can hurt me or what can affect me in a negative way. And but that's when it comes to the memory, I've told you numerous memories that I've had, and I can tell you straight out from point A to point B on a number of them. But as far as the detail of it, like colors and stuff like that, no, I don't necessarily remember it. And as far as good things that happen, don't necessarily remember those. You know what I mean? I remember some. I remember getting a hole in one with golf. I remember that happening. But I don't recall, anything of the rest of that round at all. So the memory thing, it kind of is a kick with me because I definitely can relate to a lot of things that are said from this particular article and articles that are similar to it. It's just one of those things as to where it's amazing what the body does in order to stay alive.
No, but it's interesting. So witnessing a crime, I said, if you're watching somebody that you recognize, that you know, and you watch them commit the crime, that's a memory that you can trust. We've talked about that on here, and I've talked about that on here. That's a memory that you can trust, and maybe you should trust. But if you're watching a stranger commit a crime, the emotional event of the stranger committing the crime, that's sort of the emotional triggering thing. And this study would sort of imply that all the details now that you fill in around that, the height of the person, the weight of the person, were they wearing glasses, did they have a tattoo, all that detail that you fill in, that can all be suspect now because that's not detail that's relevant to the fact that there is this person committing a crime right in front of you. That's the thing the brain emphasizes on. That's what it remembers. And then it fills in all the other detail because your brain likes to fill in details, and then it all gets shellacked together in one product, and then that's now your memory of the thing. But this research tends to show that that's probably less reliable than if you just ask somebody what they saw if a crime wasn't committed, and we know how suspect that memory can be. Hey, I don't know, what was that guy wearing that came in? I don't know, but now if he committed a crime and say what was he wearing, people are sure what he was wearing, although they could be wrong. Unless you're actively trying to remember, which a lot of us aren't. We don't train ourselves to actively be active witnesses, but you can train yourself to do that so that when you're in a high stress situation, you go through sort of a checklist of, saying it out loud to yourself kind of thing. Okay, blue shirt, tan pants.
Yeah. You wonder, is your mic on?
Yeah. Trying to get it off.
You wonder how it works with statistical data, because like numbers and stuff, I remember very well. You know what I mean? And like, like mathematics, I know you know very well. So it's like you wonder why it is that we can remember that pretty vividly. And it must be also, I imagine, conditioning, but what attachment do we have to a number? I mean, that's how I actually memorize numbers. If somebody gives me a phone number or somebody gives me an address or something like that, I remember it from sports, from either like stock car numbers or football jerseys or whatever.
Yeah, so that's the emotional connection right there. It's not just not remembering just numbers. You're remembering.
Right, in that particular case, but I'm saying as far as like our mathematics and stuff like that, or like for me, hell, I was a compulsive gambler, so I saw a lot of numbers, 6.5, 6.2, whatever. I knew I could tell you what the number was on a particular game, and I guess that must have been the emotional sense from my addiction, I guess, that made it so clear, you know. But you just wonder if statistical data would have similar effects.
I know for me, for memory, especially when you talk about some of this math stuff, my memory is a little bit. I don't really trust it a lot for details, but what I do remember is sort of the story. My brain does a good job of sort of filling all that details to tell the story. But that's the beauty of mathematics is there's these basic assumptions that you make, and then it tells its own story from there. So as my brain is filling in the details of that story, it's still anchored in the basic the basic assumptions, the axioms, or there's some starting point, and then it kind of fills in the story itself. So it's not like I memorized a lot of these different things. What I've done is I've sort of memorized a couple of basic starting points, and I reconstruct the memory, which with mathematics you can do, which is not something that you can necessarily do with witnessing a crime. You don't
Right.
sort of but your brain does that. It fills in all the details. If there's people there, it puts clothes on the people, so that if you're watching a crime here and there was a person over there in that part of the room, I mean, your brain knows that person was wearing clothes. Otherwise, you would have noticed they were naked. Okay, so now your brain starts putting clothes on them, and you may start remembering what color clothes the person that was over there was wearing when you were witnessing this crime over here. But that's probably faulty memory. That's just your brain just filling in gaps. But the beauty of mathematics is you don't have that problem. I mean, whatever it fills in, that's good. Because but you have to train your brain. I think that's a lot of studying of mathematics to sort of be able to sort of tease out the stuff when you're with math and think mathematically.
And that does make sense because, like, if there's a criminal investigation or something in that case, they know that your eyes saw something. It's just a matter of whether or not that it had an emotional stimuli for you to remember it, and that's why they'll sit there and they'll say, they'll ask you very preliminary questions, how tall was he, it's like, did he have glasses, did he this, and they're looking basically for you to trigger your memory to say, there it is, and you can, and oh, I did see that, and as far as like me with being with numbers with betting when it came to sports and stuff, what you just said kind of makes sense, because if I saw 6.5 like in a football game, that means they have to win by a touchdown. So I'm picturing them, scoring at least a touchdown more than the other team. Or
there's probably a story behind that 6.5 too that you're able to connect to. That I was expecting it to be 8. It's only 6.5. Why is that? Oh, this guy, there's like information that's connected to it that now you remember.
Yeah, I mean,
that 6.5 makes sense because I understand what was happening this week in training.
Yeah, and it makes sense because I was actually watching a documentary last night, and it was about gambling and about a degenerate that was always lost, and he had mentioned the football game, they only had to score 17.5 points, and how easy is that? Well, I just started laughing. From my experience, 17.5, you don't ever bet the over. You know what I mean? And it's like, and he's like, all they have to do is score 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals. And I'm like, yeah, you're done. And it was right off the bat, because I had that experience as to where the 17.5, I probably bet the over at some point in time in life and realized how many times I lost on it. And I said, okay, that was sort of like bludgeoning me in the head, saying, don't do this anymore. So when you see 17.5, do not bet the over. Just if you can't go under, don't do it. And it was funny how it was just last night where I saw that documentary, and I was like, I just started laughing. I said, yeah, he's done. And my next door neighbor said he started laughing. And I'm like, it was just one of those things as to where I probably just had that in my memory.
So, but it's but you talked about PTSD. I think that's another thing that is interesting because and it's kind of like what you're talking about there too. That's one of those things that imprints on your perspective. It's you're always on alert for It's a survival thing, as you mentioned, and even taking sort of a step back, just memory, and well, I guess it's not even a step back. This is exactly the step that we want to have. That our memory has evolved for very specific reasons. I mean, it evolves for for evolutionary reasons. So it helps you survive, helps you reproduce, helps you live long enough to reproduce, live long enough to take care of your kids, and after that, memory doesn't really matter too much. So if your memory fades as you get older, there's no reason for human brain
Yeah,
for
there's
memory to
hardly
last
anything
forever.
There's nothing punitive that's going to be an issue.
Right. From an evolutionary standpoint, it's not going to hurt you. Uh, but as it develops itself, in order to enhance those other features, it doesn't need to be a perfect memory. We don't need perfect recall. What we need is quick recall. It can be inaccurate as long as we can make up for quickness, and we can get quickness by with an emotional connection, because we start looking for just a couple of flags, and we're on alert for a couple of flags. Boom! It triggers an emotional response. Now we start acting, and that's what the emotions are. This part of the brain that's is trying to get us to do things. It's that's the part that's talking to us. Do it, do it, do it, do it now, do it now. So when you have these emotional responses, that triggers our actions, and you do all that before any processing, before you have to process the entire scene, before you have to think about it. You're already reacting to just something you saw out of the corner of your eye. And that's just the brain evolved that way. We have to live with that. We cannot change the way our brain works. We need to understand how our brain works. I think it's important to recognize that our brain is faulty. How can we address some of this stuff? Well, this is where journaling is actually a really good tool. And in fact, the study here was a good example of that, where the next day they had the people write out some careful survey of what happened. If we did that every day, especially, if we did it the day after any of our important events in our lives, that would be now the trusted record of what happened, more so than your memory of it. Because when 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, it doesn't matter how solid your memory is. What was your memory the day after? Because that's pretty solid memory. That's not going to be too far off. There's that is going to be that's actually the best chance of getting the memory. Beyond a day or so, now it's kind of gone. Whatever is going to get set in stone is going to be set in stone. But at least while the memory's fresh and you're writing about it, there's a chance you can kind of tease out that detail, because the memory is still like wet. It's like wet jelly or wet concrete. So it hasn't set yet. So when memories get set, and then there's like, what is it? We could do a whole show on memory too, and I'm not a memory expert, but it's this is one idea that too with memories is it's not necessarily set forever either. It's almost like your memory, it kind of is set, but whenever you recall it, when you think about it again, it's almost like making a photocopy of it. And it's not even making a photocopy. It's like getting somebody to because your perspective comes into play again. You make you basically remember it in some sense. So it's almost like you don't make a copy of the memory as much as you kind of
sort of like a photo layer based off of how your perception is that particular day.
Right, and then when you're done remembering that time, that's the one that gets stored again. So your memory is not like a book that you check out of a library and then put back. It's like you take it out of the library, you rewrite it, and you put that new copy back. And then that rewriting it, that's the recalling the memory, and that's what you're recalling. And then you're putting that copy back, and every time you remember it, you're doing this. So the more you remember it, the more different times you remember it too, the more degraded the memory really becomes. The more the details are less trusted. So things that you think about all the time, some memories that you're constantly reliving. I mean, there's a chance that you're actually are you damaging the memory? I don't know what that even really means exactly, because the emotional connection to the memory is still real. And that's what's really funny here. That's the real part here. The memory itself is not the real part. That's not even, in fact, it's not even the most important part. The most important part is how you feel about the memory. It's like a dream analysis. People they get really wrapped up in dream analysis. Oh, you dream about birds. Oh, this means that. You dream you were falling. It doesn't really matter what anything in the dream really was. What matters is how those things in the dream make you feel, because then you can talk about that, and because they make you feel that way for a reason. So whatever memories you have and your emotional connections to your memories, whatever they are, um, on some level, the actual memory itself is irrelevant. But what's important is what you feel about that memory and why do you feel that way, because that's the stuff that's really you. That's what defines you. That's that's part of your perspective. That's part of your it's going to control a lot of your perceptions. It's going to trigger your thoughts. It's going to trigger your emotions. That's kind of really who you are. It's not who you are is less your memories. I remember there was a time period where I thought about that. It's like, go in and mess with people's memories kind of thing. And that's at one point in time, I really believed there's nothing worse that you can do to a person than mess with their memories like that, because the memories is who they are. That's who they are. And over time, I've changed that opinion. That it's not the memories who we are. It's our emotional responses to our memories. That's more who we are. You could substitute all my memories out, put all new memories in. If I'm having the same emotional responses to those memories, then I'm essentially the same person. My perspective hasn't changed. I am who I am. I'm going to trigger the same thoughts. I'm going to trigger the same emotions under similar circumstances because of my connection to my memories is what's important. But if you start messing with, and maybe messing is the wrong word even, but playing with your emotional connections to your memories is one way to. In fact, that's a treatment for PTSD. It's ecstasy is one drug that they're experimenting with. There's psilocybin, mushrooms. If I said that right, there's another one of these drugs that they're looking at using for treating PTSD, because what they do is they go in and they change the emotional connection to your memory. So basically, one thing you don't generally do with PTSD, especially people who have that sort of the single event type PTSD. You can get a PTSD that's over a long period of time where you're just in a situation. But then there's this punctuated sort of PTSD. And people who have this punctuated PTSD, one treatment that you don't do is you don't have them relive the event, to see what happens, like it's sort of cruel experiment. You don't generally do that because there's no value in it. You're just going to trigger a response. Where are you going with this? But with these drug treatments, using and the ones that they've experimented with are like ecstasy and MDMA. Is that the thing? Is ecstasy? I don't know. You know my drugs, tell you the truth. And psilocybin. But it's to get the people in this sort of this emotional state where more positive feelings are going on. And then reliving the event then under these conditions where the people are safe, they're in a trusting environment, and they're actually in a good mood. And then you can attenuate the connection, because you're not going to make it a happy memory. That ain't going to happen. But what you can do is you can take all those hard edges off, right, so that now it's not triggered. It doesn't become a PTSD moment. It actually becomes a memory that they can revisit. And that you can actually, after this treatment, and the treatment is it's a one-time treatment usually. The ones I've seen, it's like 6 months leading up to 6 months leading up to where you actually administer the drug and then do this session. But it's a one-time thing, maybe twice, but it's not like, oh, get you on these drugs and you do them for a long period. No, we get you, we do it one time. It's an all-day event. It's not a half hour. I mean, it's an all-day affair, because you gotta be comfortable, relaxed, and you gotta take the drug. You gotta be tripping a little bit, and then you go in and you do a little thing, and then but when you're done, it's taking those edges off, so that now the sudden noise or the bright light or the little thing that used to trigger it, that's all been smoothed out. So then now it's a memory like any other memory that sits there. And then it'll be uncomfortable perhaps in the future when you recall it, but it's not being triggered by these things out there that are these antennae that are just looking for anything. So it's an amazing treatment, but it's messing with your memory, but it's messing with the emotional connections, and that fundamentally does change who you are. Because I mean, if you see a person who's suffering from PTSD versus a person when they're not suffering from it, that's a big difference.
Well, that's like with electroshock therapy. I mean, as you know, I was approached to doing electroshock therapy, and I said yes right away. and because I didn't want to live the life that I was living anymore, and the feeling is that it was due to what was inside my head, you know. And one of the side effects was that it's possible that you would lose a decent amount of memory, you know, specifically, definitely from the most recent. But, you know, those same doctors that said the most recent could not say that it would just only be the most recent. And one of the main factors of me deciding against having electroshock therapy was that I would have the feeling still in my head, emotional based, but I wouldn't have the memory in order to be able to rationalize it.
Yeah.
And I knew, I mean, it'd be one thing if I was hit by a truck and I just didn't remember what the heck happened to me. But when I'm sitting there and I know that I had this treatment that was done, and it erased part of my memory, that would drive me nuts, because I would sit there and insist on trying to find what was in my head, and that's not an option right now. So that was one of the main things. That was one of the main things that made me decide to try an alternative versus electroshock therapy. But that was really one of the only things.
You know, that's true. That's a great point about that too. Is that, you know, when you think about how electroshock, you know, what's really going on, what's the intention here? Um, you know, if one of the things it does is just kind of wipe out those memories, you're right. You still have all those emotions and stuff. Now, what you don't have necessarily, maybe because the memories are gone, is you're less likely to get triggered with those emotions. But it's all, the underlying problem is still there. So, you know, whatever it was that was causing you problems before, you know, that's still there and can still be causing you problems in the future. If you've got a similar situation. So that even with electroshock therapy, you still have to go do all the hard work to, you know, really kind of shift your perspective. I mean, and that's really kind of what you're doing, is you have to change the way you think about things, the way you feel about things. And that's hard to do. That's really hard to change the way you feel about things, the way you think about things, because, you know, we're very comfortable with the way we think about things, the way we feel about things, because that's who we are. I mean, that is really kind of who we are. I mean, you talk about somebody, you know, a lot of times you don't talk about their memories. You talk about how they react in certain situations. Oh, that person says, you know, you describe that person. A lot of descriptions is how they react in certain situations, and that gives you, oh, I know that kind of person. I don't have to know their whole history. I just need to know how they act in certain situations, and I know a lot about them. And if you want to change who you are, which, you know, again, brings up these questions: what does it even mean to be who I am? You know, who am I? You know, I don't want to turn this into a philosophical discussion tonight on existentialism, but, you know, but these things are all tied together. I mean, there's a lot of philosophy that's happening under the surface here about, you know, what defines us, who are we? You know, and then, you know, you can bring in the metaphysical stuff about our soul, and, you know, and there's this, you know, what is the essence of me? What is the essence of you? You know, what does that even mean? But one of the places I think we're starting to make some progress and understand, at least where I am, is understanding that it's my emotional connection to my memories are really, really important. They're not so important they're important in defining me, but they don't have to remain fixed. You know, that's the other thing, is, you know, a lot of people are like, I can't, you know, I got to hold on to my identity, and, you know, it's got to be this fixed thing that never changes, you know, and that's a dangerous way of thinking. You know, it's okay to change the way you think and feel about things, especially if, like me or Shane's admitted to, you know, it causes some issues in your life. If the way you think and feel about certain things becomes a maladaptive skill, you know, and it's not getting you anywhere, it's like, now's probably a good time for me to change the way I think and feel about things. But that's a scary proposition, because you don't know where you're going from there. So you don't have a lot of control over how you're going to feel about something. You might be able to work on getting it to change, but you don't know where it's going to sort of end up. It's like, you can't just make yourself like something that you don't like. You have to find a reason to like it. You know, it's like believing or not believing. You don't choose to believe a certain thing. You can't just. I mean, there are people who kind of do this, and I don't really think they really do this, but they're going to convert for the sake of to whatever religion, or deconvert. They're going to leave religion. You just can't. You don't just do that. I mean, it happens usually over time. There's a breaking point where it's bending, and then there's a snap. You have a crisis of faith. You have a revelation. You have an epiphany. I mean, you might go through this period where you're really noticing the change, and it's accelerating change. But it's stuff that's built up over time. And you can't just wake up one day and say, "Oh, I'm going to believe in God today," or "I'm going to stop believing in God today." You don't do that. The brain doesn't work that way. And there's a good reason for it. I mean, it's comes back to evolution, obviously. So it's things that are slow, takes time, and our emotions are really important. And because like I said, the amygdala, the way it talks to the rest of the brain. I mean, I guess let's talk about it sometimes. Autism kind of works in here too, because there's some sort of like emotional or lack of emotion. But what's going on with the amygdala with autism, people on the autism spectrum, and how is that affecting their perception? What is their perspective on the universe, depending on where they are on the scale? Because some we can actually talk to and get a really good insight into what they're thinking and feeling. But a lot of them are some of the more interesting cases. They're on this end of the scale where they're very, very difficult to communicate with. There's actually one really good guy. One guy they call him the Brain Man, because it sounds like Rain Man, and it's a play off of that. And in fact, and I can't remember his name now, but I should look it up. He's an English guy, young guy. I don't know, he's young now. He might be 40 now. But he met the Rain Man guy in real life. Kim Peek. Kim Peek was the guy that the Rain Man movie was one of the inspirations for the Rain Man movie. But he was very difficult to communicate with. I mean, he was an amazing character. Just a fascinating character. But this other guy, who it's a documentary, Brain Man, look it up. He's on this really at the very high, very, very high functioning. You wouldn't even know that he suffers from any kind of anything on the autism spectrum. Except for when you start seeing his skills, and then just a little quirky moments. First, like, odd. But he taught himself Icelandic in a week, as a proof that that he could learn a language quickly. Okay, learn Icelandic. Okay, no problem. And then they sent him to Iceland, and he did a radio show, interview show. And I was like, okay, I guess he can learn Icelandic in a week if he has to. But his thing was that he sees pictures of numbers. I think every number between 1 and 10,000, he has a different image in his head of that number. So here's a number like 475. He's got a picture in his head, 475. But then he does math with these pictures that nobody really understands. But he can for some reason he's able to add the pictures together and get a new picture. And there's colors and the sounds. The whole thing's really weird. But he kind of has this weird thing going on in his head. So they talk. He's a source of a lot of research too. A lot of psychologists like to talk to him, and because they can get a sense of what's going on in your head. What are you thinking here? And what is your perception here?
You talk about memory. I've worked with autistic adults. I've worked with autistic adults for a few years straight, and talk about memory. They got it. And there's no doubt about it. I mean, I'll tell you a quick story is that there was this guy who did not like clothes. He didn't like them on him, and he didn't like them on you. He didn't like them, period. And he would rip them off if need be. So he had a Velcro suit. And but he would sit there, and he had one eye that was very dominant. And he would look, and he'd see something, and he'd laugh. And he'd be like, it was like he took a picture of something with a camera. Like he saw something that only he knew exactly what it is that he was looking at. And it was eerie at times, because it was like, uh-oh, he's putting together something. And this dude would literally plan something a week to 2 weeks in advance to escape. He just wanted to find a way. And he would wait for what it was is that it was a group home, and so he'd wait for the other residents to start doing something. aggressing in some sort of way, and most of them are not violent. And he's not, but he was a large man, so he would sit there and he'd see somebody acting up, and the staff would be paying attention to that person, and then all of a sudden he put those pictures that he took 2 weeks in advance all together, and shoo, he took off. And I mean, it was like, and I was like, oh, I mean, he it was really an experience to work with autistic adults, because it was a different kind of world that you really couldn't fathom unless if you did work with them and saw that they're not dumb in any way. They are not in any way stupid or retarded or anything like that. They are very, very intelligent, and they just happen to manifest it in a different way.
Okay, well, that's kind of talked a lot there about memory, subtotal recall. I'm fascinated by memory, how it works, but again, the emotional connections to our memories, unbelievably important, and it does play an important part in our lives and our perspective. And our perspective, again, controls a lot of our thoughts, a lot of our emotions, and perception. Because the world's doing whatever the world's doing, the universe is doing whatever it's doing. Eventually, that information's got to somehow get into our heads, and it gets distorted and twisted, and important parts, and important in quotes. The brain picks out what it wants to remember, what it wants to look at, what it wants to focus on, and then it fills in the gaps on everything else. I mean, even your eyes are doing that right now. It's filling in a lot of gaps. You feel like we have this solid field of view here, and it's your brain's filling in a lot of gaps. It's just what it does. Twitter update, or look at Twitter. Get us. You can send us a tweet at RTWRE. That's Random Thoughts with Random Access. Use that hashtag RTWRE. You can follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. On Twitter, it's Random Access is the Twitter account. On Facebook, it's Random Thoughts with Random Access Facebook page. But the other thing was to check here Twitter account. It was 950 yesterday, and that's the low. That's the all-time low. 950, and today, still hold at 950. It was 950 yesterday, 950 Saturday. We've been holding at 950. Haven't pissed anybody off. Hey, that's a good thing, I guess. Get us on the feedback line. It's good in the U.S. and Canada. It's 15189-666-175 from 3 to 5 on the weekends, 3 to 4 during the week, 11 to midnight after the show. And we actually need to wrap this up now because it's going to be hitting 11 o'clock and the phones are going to start ringing. So that's 15189-666-1715. Hit us up on the feedback line. Catch us on Twitter. Catch us on Facebook. Catch us on Google+. And on YouTube.
Random everywhere.
We're everywhere. Good night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
Good night, folks.